Dr. Cynthia Wesley-Esquimaux served previously as the Vice Provost for the Indigenous Initiatives at Lakehead University for 3 years. Effective September 2016, she was appointed as the first Indigenous Chair for the Truth and Reconciliation in Canada for Lakehead University and continues to develop pathways forward to reconciliation across Canada. We are really fortunate to have Cynthia on our board. Cynthia, please.
Yeah, thank you for that. I also want to just thank you for mentioning the missing children and the burials that have been going on all this week. I've been on different kinds of media through the week, and it's been very challenging because both of my parents also attended residential school for 20 years between them. And you know, I have a granddaughter, and there's different people in my life that have had, you know, extensive intergenerational effects from those experiences. So it's been a very rough year for everybody, a rough time for everybody. And I think it's only going to grow worse because there's going to be more. There's about 128 residential schools across Canada that are currently looking into the very same thing. And once they begin that technology and start visualizing down, they're going to be finding a lot more, because something like 50% or a little over 50% of the children that went to residential school actually died. Many were returned home, but many were not. So those children will be found, and it's going to be very challenging for everybody. So thank you for acknowledging that. I'm joining you because I bring some knowledge from the Indigenous community across Canada. I'm also the chair for the National Centre on Truth and Reconciliation at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. And I'm the chair for the Teach for Canada nonprofit that teaches teachers how to teach effectively in remote communities. So I have a lot of different kinds of connections across the country that I hope will be of use to you. Today I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the materials that I put together on STEM. We are obviously trying to get our Indigenous youth deeply engaged in science, technology, engineering, math, and I'm also very enthusiastic about infusing art into this conversation, because our kids are drawn in by certain kinds of things, and art would be one of them. So go ahead. Can I change this myself, or you're going to do it? Okay. So a lot of the learning that they're very interested in is land-based. And I think it's something that everybody's come to over the pandemic, that we have to start to remind ourselves that we live on a planet that is struggling. We're struggling on the planet to be healthy and to keep the waters clean and the forests healthy and everything else. So it's a focus that we really have to start to push for all youth from every single background. Remember where you live and how important it is that we protect this land and this ground and this planet, and also it offers them some kinds of careers in their own governments because of where they live, in forests and, you know, on waters and protecting everything like that. So go ahead. I'll go through it so it won't take too long. Language and traditional teachings are land-based. We're in the process of reclamation of languages and culture. So there's a lot going on, and I think we need to recognize that. And we bring kids in through actually understanding those kinds of issues and actually supporting that. So when I was at Lakehead in Thunder Bay, one of the teachers had a student that knew all of the plants in Ojibwe, and he didn't know them in English, and he was failed because he didn't know them in English. And my feeling was, well, why don't you learn them in Ojibwe, since that's the territory you live in? So something that we have to respect is this need to recognize that these kids are coming in, they have their own language and teachings, and we need to respect that and possibly learn from them. Go ahead. So arts, what do arts have to do with it? It's the attraction to the kids through the arts. Most of them are very artistic, painting, the theater, all kinds of things are going on across Canada in those communities. And there's a number of different organizations that are bringing the arts alive for a lot of these young people. So if we can actually connect those things, it's going to be very important. At York University, they have a professor who they rejected bringing in Indigenous theater, and it took them about 15 years to do it. And now everybody wants it. So it's got something that obviously has a lot of cachet for people. Go ahead. Art's also a vehicle of expression for our young people to connect them to the elders. And when you look at the medicine wheels across all of the continent, those things were not randomly placed. They're placed in places of what we regard as power. And of course, that brings in the whole questions of science, technologies, and engineering and math because of how they're structured. And each one of those wheels has a certain kind of authority, and our elders still actually utilize these. And there's quite a few of them across Canada, and they're still very viable. So something that we can also pay attention to is what's already existing and has been in existence for millennia, that we can teach our young people, or at least approach them through and get them interested in the work that you're trying to do at WIN. Go ahead. Our creation stories are another avenue of expression and an avenue, a vehicle to bring in young people. Again, the creation stories are based on, this one's called The Woman Who Fell from the Sky, and it's a Haudenosaunee or Iroquois or Mohawk, I guess, for those of you that have never heard the words. And it's about assessing height, gravity, depth, technology, construction of the earth. And there's lots in there. And a lot of our, like Gregory Coyetti, a lot of our Indigenous philosophers and scientists are actually working with Western scientists and philosophers to have these conversations to show quite clearly where the connections are and how we can join those creation stories together with Western knowledge and actually influence and inspire the young people that we're trying to bring into our academic settings. Go ahead. The creation stories provide land-based identity formation for our young people. So again, they're interested through scientific exploration of all of the things that make the planet work and all of the things that feed us and keep us healthy. So our elders are talking about all of these different pieces, and they're all connected. I mean, the strawberry is connected to heart. Each of the plants that we now know through Western science has a certain role to play. Our kids need to know that too. And we've been growing corn and beans and squash and understood the science behind that. And we were able to have something in this territory where I am now, something like 7,000 acres in corn. And we were able to moderate that and actually trade that for meats and other kinds of things. So there was trade going on long before anybody else arrived here. So those are important considerations and teachings for our young people to get them excited about the idea of scientific exploration when it comes to anything that has to do with land, waters, or other elements, fire, and all those. In fact, in Australia, when the big fires were going on in Australia, the Indigenous Australians said to the government, you could ask us and we would explain to you how to utilize this fire more effectively and how to control it. Because even in my territory, we had controlled burns over the years to enable the land to be healthy. And we stopped doing those things because we were told we couldn't do them anymore. But we also understand the utility of fire and how important it is to the health of the land. Go ahead. And we're connected in every way. So we understand that we are connected to everything. Everyone is connected to everything. And the Indigenous knowledge and science are very much in sync with each other when it comes to what happens. And so we're starting to get a handle on things like epigenetics and adverse childhood experience and the relationship between those things and how that contributes to Indigenous healing, so our people can move forward in a much stronger way. And for other people who call themselves settlers, don't really use that kind of language, but the fact that we are also connected. We're all human beings, and it's very important that Indigenous peoples are seen that way. And I've listened to Indigenous women when I did the missing and murdered Indigenous women pre-inquiry process, and every single place I went to, Indigenous women said they needed to be seen as human beings like anybody else, and that would help to stem the tide of murder and missing women that is happening and continuing to happen today. Go ahead. And this whole idea of survival and learning matters from the land and the waters and the air. We are very strongly associated to the teachings that come out of the land and the animals that live there. All of our creation stories, everything is related to the fact that we are connected. And also the dangers of rampant technology on the natural world. And you can see for yourselves, you're very aware in the work that you do as scientists, how much inclusion or exclusion we've done and how much damage we've done to the natural world and and everything that lives in it with our technology. So we have to think about that, I think, very carefully. And I know it's something that a lot of Indigenous peoples are very cognizant of. Go ahead. And the 4 seasons, just the whole question of the messages for humanity and what we do to the earth and what's been happening with so many of the extreme weather events that we're now moderating and what's happening in the Arctic where people and animals are dying because the permafrost is mucky and things are getting stuck in it, and the water levels are rising, and we're going to have environmental refugees from so many different places. So we're very cognizant of what's happening and how it's changing the seasons, and how it's very hard now for the elders in places like the Arctic to actually read the environment like they used to, because it's been changed so dramatically by our what we are doing as human beings. Go ahead, just a couple more. And connecting this Indigenous knowledge to Western, we're not anti-development, and I think that's really important that we understand that. We want to work with you more closely because we see that there needs to be changes in the environment where we live, and we can actually benefit. So it's not about anti-development, it's what are you doing, why are you doing it, how are you doing it, and whom are you doing it to? Can it teach, can STEM teaching make sure it comes back to clean water and air? That's what people want. They want to know, in the north, there are lakes that are absolutely stunning, beautiful, dead from the acid rain and all of the things that have actually happened. So we have people that say, yeah, the lake, you know, it's gorgeous, but there's nothing in it, and it doesn't help the people survive in the territories where they are. The extreme weather events I've mentioned, bringing kids in to understand acid rain and all the things that are happening, and also just carbon labeling, the things that they're hearing about but have no real knowledge of, and how we can take that knowledge and actually transmit it to the community so that they can utilize it more effectively there and get the educations they need to help preserve and protect the environments that they're living in, especially in remote communities. Go ahead. I think, and then, yeah, the whole question of the moon and the stars and the regulation that's happening there, and the mental health of these people, that, you know, using the stars as navigation tools. We're reconstituting a lot of that knowledge in our communities. There are many stories that are now coming back as people are more willing to talk about the history, and more willing to talk about the knowledge bases that were crushed by the government's laws and inability to practice spiritual knowledge, because it was outlawed for many years, and it went underground, and a lot of people had no access to it. So there's a lot of things that are happening in that regard as well, and stories that can be told. Go ahead. And then just the kinds of things that STEM or STEAM could represent to students, you know, counting all living assets on the land. We're doing that in places like BC, around the Alert Bay. They know everything, every tree. They're mapping everything, exploring the reasons behind the extreme weather events, the volcano eruptions. These are the kinds of things that kids are very interested in, and these are the kinds of things that we want to bring to the community. This kind of understanding, you know, clear cutting. They're against that. Producing heat and air conditioning in northern climates, or even globally, since the planet is warming and there's extreme heat in other places that is not being controlled, and people are dying. And then finally, I think that's the last. Go ahead, one more. Oh, just about healing. So we're in this process, I think, that's really important right now. And I need Canadians to support this. They need to speak up to their MPs, their MPPs, their municipalities, and understand that land is never far away. If you're living in an urban center, there's still parks and there's still land where our kids can learn. And we want to bring our non-Indigenous kids together with our Indigenous kids to learn from each other, and to accept that they have a role to play in ensuring that we make the right kinds of decisions as we move forward. And working, they don't have to be living on a reserve, and they don't have to be living in the Northern Territory to appreciate that. I think then that would be the last. Go ahead, one more. I think, yeah, and just thank you. These kids have a lot going for them, and we're reconstituting a lot of their cultures and their traditions, their wise practices, and we just hope that as we move forward, any assistance I can be to ensure that you understand who a lot of Indigenous peoples are, and where they're coming from, and what the kinds of things that are going on across Canada at probably a fairly different level than the one that you're most accustomed to. I'd like to be able to see, to help you out with that, and if I can contribute, great. So thank you so much for listening to that. I just wanted to give you some ideas about what